For most of history, money had to feel real. It had to weigh something in the hand. It had to shine, ring, endure. Gold, silver, metal. People trusted money because they trusted the substance inside it. But that world is gone. The modern economy does not run on metal. It runs on belief. Your salary, your savings, your rent, your taxes, your nation's debt. Most of it is built on something you cannot melt down, cannot bite, cannot hold for long in physical form. What replaced metal was not just paper. It was trust, organized, enforced, and scaled. That shift changed far more than commerce. It changed who could wage war, who could collect taxes, who could survive a crisis, and who could command an empire without moving a single wagon of silver. And that raises a deeper question. When value leaves the coin, where does it go? Into law? Into banks? Into the state? Into collective belief? Because once money no longer depends on metal, society itself begins to rest on something far more powerful and far more fragile. Metal felt safe because metal was visible. A silver coin could be weighed, a gold coin could be tested. Its value seemed to live inside the object itself. And for a long time, that was enough. In smaller economies, across shorter distances, in worlds where trust traveled slowly, metal gave people something solid to hold against uncertainty. But solidity has limits. A growing empire cannot easily fund distant armies with chests of coin alone. A larger trading world cannot move at full speed if every transaction depends on weight, transport, and physical supply. And a state that needs taxes, fleets, roads, grain, and war finance cannot wait for metal to appear from the ground on time. That is the paradox at the heart of monetary history. The more complex society became, the less enough metal seemed to be. And the more fragile thing, trust, began to outperform the stronger one. Because trust could move faster than silver. It could stretch farther than gold. It could scale. What looked weaker in the hand became stronger in the system. And once that happened, money stopped being only a store of value. It became infrastructure for power. So this is the real turning point. The story is not simply that paper replaced coin. It is that money crossed a civilizational threshold. Before that shift, value appeared to live in the object. A coin carried worth because the metal seemed to carry it within itself. After that shift, value began to live somewhere else. In institutions, in law, in tax systems, in enforcement. In the public belief that a claim would be honored because a larger structure stood behind it. That changed everything. Money was no longer just a thing people exchanged. It became a social architecture. A state could now demand taxes in its own unit. A government could fund war before metal was gathered. A banking system could extend claims far beyond the coin in the vault. And ordinary life, wages, rents, debts, prices, could be reorganized around promises rather than substance. This is why the rise of trust-based money matters so much. It did not merely change the form of money. It changed where power lived. To see why trust had to replace metal, we first need to understand why metal ruled for so long. Gold and silver solved a very old problem. In a world with weak institutions, slow communication, and limited trust between strangers, people needed money that could defend itself. Something scarce, something durable, something divisible, something difficult to fake. Gold and silver did all of that. They did not depend on a distant government staying solvent. They did not require a banking system to keep its promises.
Gold and
They did
silver
not
do
ask
depend
ordinary
on a
people to
distant
trust a
government,
complex chain
banks,
of claims.
or complex chains
The
of
value
claim.
seemed to sit inside the coin itself. That mattered more than we often realize. In early markets, along caravan routes, across fragmented kingdoms and uncertain borders, metal gave trade a common language. It made exchange possible where law was weak and political authority was uneven. A silver coin could cross frontiers more easily than a royal decree. A gold piece could outlast a ruler. For a world with shallow trust and thin institutions, precious metal was not primitive money. It was a remarkably elegant solution.
But metal had a weakness that only became visible when the world grew larger. Coins were reliable, yet reliability came with weight. Silver had to be mined, minted, guarded, counted, and moved. Gold could store great value in small form, but not in enough volume to finance every expanding need of a growing system. That mattered once trade widened. As routes stretched farther, transactions thickened, and states became more ambitious, metal began to slow the very world it had once stabilized. It was too rigid for a faster economy. Supply could not expand on command. New silver did not appear just because armies needed pay, merchants needed liquidity, or governments needed grain, roads, and fleets. And metal had another problem. Good coins were often hoarded, melted, exported, or withdrawn from circulation when uncertainty rose. The stronger the coin, the more people wanted to keep it out of everyday exchange. So the paradox deepened. The monetary foundation that had once made trade possible began to act like a brake on expansion. For a smaller world, metal was discipline. For a larger one, it was becoming a constraint. The first great breakthrough did not happen in modern Europe. It happened in Song China. By the 10th and 11th centuries, commerce had grown too large, too dense, and too fast for metal alone. Markets expanded, cities swelled, trade routes thickened. Taxes, wholesale exchange, and long-distance payment all demanded more liquidity than coins could easily provide. Copper cash still circulated, but it was heavy, inconvenient, and increasingly inadequate for a commercial world operating at greater scale. So paper began to appear. Not because paper was more real than metal, not because people suddenly stopped trusting coins, but because a more complex society needed a more flexible instrument. At first, these paper claims were practical tools, easier to carry, easier to transfer, easier to use across distance. Then the state stepped in, standardized issuance, and turned convenience into monetary power. That is the real significance of Song China. Paper money did not defeat metal by proving greater intrinsic value. It defeated metal by proving more useful to a larger system.
We have a discrepancy here.
And once usefulness began to outweigh
Recalculate the silk
substance,
values.
the center of money started to move,
The
away
deeper
from the coin
significance of Song
and
China
toward the structure
was not
behind it.
merely
But the deeper
inventing
significance
paper
of
money.
Song China was not simply the invention of paper money. It was something more radical than that. A society had begun to accept a symbol in place of substance, not as a temporary shortcut, not as a convenience at the edges, but as a serious bearer of value inside a growing economic order. That is the real breakthrough. For centuries, metal had carried the economic weight because people believed value had to sit inside the object. Now that weight began to move, from copper to paper, from substance to claim, from what money was made of to what society agreed it meant. That shift changed the logic of exchange. Once a symbol could carry value, trade no longer had to move at the speed of metal. Payment could travel farther. Taxation could become more organized. Markets could thicken. Administration could reach deeper into daily life. In other words, trust had started doing economic work
that metal once had to do alone. And that is the moment worth paying attention to. Because once belief begins to carry monetary value, the future of money no longer belongs only to miners, mints, and metal. It belongs to institutions that can make symbols hold. If Song China showed that paper could carry value, England revealed something even more consequential. A modern state could turn trust into power. When the Bank of England was founded in 1694, the real innovation was not paper alone. It was public credit, organized, standardized, and tied to the fiscal machinery of the state. That changed the scale of money. Now governments did not need to wait for metal to accumulate before acting. They could borrow against future tax revenues. They could issue claims in the present and use them to fund war, fleets, administration, and imperial expansion. This was a monetary breakthrough, but also a political one. Because once the state and the banking system learned to institutionalize trust, money stopped being only a medium of exchange. It became a weapon of duration. A kingdom with stronger credit could stay in war longer. A government with deeper financial credibility could mobilize resources faster than a rival still trapped by metal. That is why this moment matters so much. The rise of public credit did not just change banking. It changed the balance between states, the reach of taxation, the logic of debt, and the very capacity of empire.
A strong currency is not strong simply because it is beautiful, scarce, or difficult to copy. It is strong because a system stands behind it. And that system usually rests on 3 layers. First, the state accepts it for taxes. That matters more than it seems. The moment a government demands payment in a specific unit, it creates forced demand for that unit across society. People do not need to love the currency. They need it because the state will take nothing else. Second, banks expand that unit into credit. They do not merely store money, they multiply claims on top of it. That is how a monetary system reaches beyond the metal in a vault or the paper in circulation. Credit stretches the system forward in time. Third, society begins to price life itself in that unit. Wages, rents, land, debt, labor, assets. Once that happens, money is no longer just a medium of exchange. It becomes the measuring grid of social reality. This is the colder truth behind monetary power. Money works when trust, institutions, and enforcement converge. Not trust alone, not law alone, not force alone, but all 3 together. That is when a currency stops being an object and becomes an order. By the 19th century, the problem was no longer whether money could be based on trust. It already was. The question was how to restrain that trust before it expanded too far. That is why gold returned to the center. Under the gold standard, modern states tried to anchor paper claims, bank credit, and industrial finance to something older, harder, and less negotiable. Gold became the final discipline behind the system, the promise that money could still be redeemed into something outside politics, outside rhetoric, outside the appetites of the state. That promise mattered. It reassured savers. It stabilized exchange across borders. It gave the age of empire a common monetary language. But reassurance came with a cost. A fast industrial economy needed elasticity. Banks needed room to extend credit. Governments needed room to respond to shocks, panics, and war. Gold offered confidence, but not flexibility. So the gold standard carried a deep tension inside it. It made money feel safer, even as it made modern economies more rigid. What looked like discipline to creditors
could feel like suffocation to the wider system. But the gold standard looked strongest in calm periods. Its real weakness appeared under pressure. When crisis hit, when banks trembled, when war erupted, when recessions spread through factories and households, the promise of redemption into gold stopped feeling like protection and started feeling like a chain. Because redemption imposed limits precisely when states wanted room to move. Governments needed to spend quickly. Banks needed liquidity. Markets needed reassurance. Workers needed wages to keep flowing. But gold did not expand because panic demanded it. That was the structural tension. Society wanted money to remain stable. Power wanted money to become elastic. Those two desires could live together in normal times. In emergencies, they collided. The more faithfully a state defended gold convertibility, the less freedom it had to absorb shocks. And the more it suspended discipline to save the system, the more it exposed the truth that trust had already outrun metal. This is where the gold standard began to crack. Not because gold lost its prestige, but because modern economies needed rescue faster than gold could permit. What people called stability, the system increasingly experienced as restraint. The symbolic break came in 1971. When President Nixon closed the gold window, the world crossed a line it could not uncross. The promise that dollars held by foreign governments could still be redeemed for gold was suspended, and with that, the last formal bridge between modern money and metal gave way. This is often described as the moment money became unbacked. That is too simple. Money did not lose what stood behind it. What changed was what stood there. Behind the dollar now stood something larger, more flexible, and far more political. The taxing power of the United States, the balance sheet of the central bank, the market for government bonds, and the global trust that American power could hold the system together. That was the true arrival of full fiat. From this point on, money would no longer be anchored by redemption into metal, but by confidence in institutions strong enough to manage debt, absorb shocks, and preserve order. The world did not step into a void. It stepped into a new kind of empire, one built less on gold in a vault and more on belief in the machinery of the state.
When trust replaced metal, the system became vastly more powerful. It could move faster, scale larger, generate more credit, fund rescue operations in panic, finance long wars without waiting for mines, ships, or coin chests to catch up. That changed history. States could survive shocks that would have broken older monetary orders. Banks could extend liquidity across time. Empires could project power farther than their metal reserves ever would have allowed. But that power came with a cost. Ordinary people now lived inside a world where value depended less on the substance of money and more on decisions made inside institutions they did not control. A central bank could redraw the price of credit. A treasury could expand debt in their name. A banking panic could threaten wages, savings, rents, and jobs far from the rooms where the decisions were made. This is the social consequence of modern money. The system became more adaptive at the top, but more abstract for everyone below. And once value lives inside policy, balance sheets, and credibility, daily life becomes more exposed to distant power. Money no longer merely reflects society. It reorganizes who absorbs the shock. Once money rests on trust, a monetary crisis is never just a financial event. It is a crisis of legitimacy. Because the value of modern money does not live inside the note, the coin, or the number on a screen,
It lives
Value
in the
does
public
not live
belief
inside
that the
the
promise
note,
behind
coin,
it will
or
still
number,
hold tomorrow.
but in the belief behind
When that
them.
belief weakens, the symptoms appear quickly. Inflation begins to eat through wages and savings. Depositors rush to withdraw what they can before others do. Currencies slide. Prices detach from memory, and people start reaching for something harder. Gold, foreign cash, land, goods, anything that feels less political than the money they are trying to escape. That is the deeper danger. A failing currency does not only disrupt exchange, it tells society that the institutions behind the unit may no longer deserve automatic trust. And once that suspicion spreads, monetary disorder becomes social disorder. People hoard, businesses hesitate, credit contracts, anger rises. This is why collapses feel so destabilizing. They force a brutal question into everyday life. Was the money ever stable? Or were people simply willing, for a time, to believe it was?
Today, most money is no longer metal, and barely even paper. It is bank credit, government debt, digital balances, and the expectation that the system will still be standing tomorrow. That expectation matters because the arguments shaping money now all circle the same question. Who controls trust? Inflation reminds people that value can be thinned from above. Central banks remind them that stability now depends on policy, not substance. Sovereign debt reminds them that states borrow first and ask society to absorb the consequences later. Debates over de-dollarization, gold, Bitcoin, and CBDCs are not really separate debates. They are competing answers to the same underlying fear. If trust is the true foundation of money, then who should issue it, manage it, limit it, and benefit from it? That is why this story is not over. Global debt remains elevated. Central banks are still deeply involved in digital money work, and the dollar still sits at the center of reserves, even as other currencies slowly press at the edges. The modern monetary world is not arguing about whether money needs trust. It is arguing over who gets to rule through it.
This is the deeper pattern running beneath the whole story. Money did not simply change how people bought and sold. It changed how power was organized. The moment money began to leave metal, states gained new reach. They could tax more systematically, borrow more deeply, wage war for longer, project force farther from the mine, the mint, and the treasury chest. And that changed the relationship between rulers and the ruled. What had once depended on stored substance began to depend on managed belief, on institutions, on credibility, on the ability of the state to make promises stick across an entire society. That is why monetary history is never just about currency design. It is about political reach, administrative depth, social obedience, and the shifting line between public trust and public burden. When money leaves metal, society itself is reorganized. Not only markets, but taxation. Not only trade, but war. Not only savings, but citizenship. Money does not merely move through history. It helps decide who can rule, who must pay, and who carries the cost when the system bends. So the turning point was never that money became weaker when it left metal. It became stronger, more abstract, more scalable, more adaptable, and, for that very reason, more dangerous. Because once money no longer depends on gold or silver, it no longer depends mainly on substance. It depends on authority, on institutions, on credibility, on the power to create belief extended across society and keep it alive under pressure.
That is the colder meaning of modern monetary history. It is no longer just the story of coins, mines, vaults, or precious metal. It is the story of who gets to manufacture trust, who gets to stabilize it, who gets to stretch it through debt and crisis, and who is left exposed when that trust begins to break. That is why money matters so much more than it seems. It does not merely store value. It organizes obedience, allocates pain, projects power, and decides in moments of strain whose promises survive. The age of metal asked whether money was real. The age of trust asks something harsher. Who controls belief, and who pays when it fails?